Have you ever walked into a room and felt every eye notice you, not because of what you were wearing, but because something in your presence quietly whispered, "She knows who she is"? And yet, have you also felt the silence after a man disappears, leaving you wondering if your strength was too much or not enough? There's a strange ache that settles in a woman's chest when she begins to feel like she's both too much and not enough at the same time. You start to question every move. Was I too available? Was I too distant? Too soft? Too strong? And in that overthinking, you begin to disconnect from your natural magic. But deep down, in a place beneath logic and fear, there's a knowing, a whisper from the soul, that the feminine isn't here to be less emotional, less radiant, less wild. That the most dangerously seductive thing a woman can ever be is herself, fully. You see, this video isn't about manipulation, it's about remembering. Remembering that you carry in your body and your voice something ancient, something men can feel, even if they can't explain it. Carl Jung called it the Anima, the feminine archetype that lives in a man's unconscious, the part of him that longs for emotional depth, intuition, mystery. And when a woman embodies that energy, not by pretending or pleasing, but by being, she becomes unforgettable. But here's the trap. So many women have learned to seek validation through self-sacrifice, to trade truth for approval, to hide their intensity in exchange for being chosen. It's not your fault. It's a wound we carry together. A story passed down quietly, generation after generation. The last storytelling, to be part. This is where we break that pattern. Because the behaviors that men find truly magnetic aren't about performance, they're about embodiment. They arise when a woman stops chasing and starts remembering who she is. When she chooses silence over proving, stillness over chasing, soul over strategy. When she lives not to be chosen, but because she has already chosen herself. This is where the video begins. This is where your power returns. Not as something to use on him, but as something to awaken in you. Because the woman who knows her worth doesn't need to seduce. Her presence does it for her. There's a quiet, unspoken ache that lives inside many women, a feeling that something about who they are must be adjusted, softened, or controlled to be lovable. You sense it when you're getting dressed and pause to wonder, will this make me too much? Or when you're about to speak your truth but hesitate, fearing it might push him away. You want connection, but part of you believes it must be earned, through perfection, silence, or sweetness that doesn't disturb the peace. This is the emotional experience that so many women carry, often silently. And when we talk about behaviors that men find dangerously seductive, we must start here, with the inner conflict, because it's never really about acting seductive. It's about a woman losing touch with the truth of who she is and then slowly reclaiming it. There's a part of you, maybe hidden, maybe suppressed, that longs to be seen without shrinking. She wants to walk into a room without calculating how she's being perceived. She wants to speak with power, move with softness, and exist without apology. But she's been told over and over that this kind of power is dangerous, too emotional, too dramatic, too much. So she learns to shrink, to smile even when she's hurt, to chase love quietly, not through words, but through emotional labor. She silences the voice inside her that asks, why do I feel like I have to perform to be chosen? Carl Jung called this inner suppression the shadow, the parts of ourselves that were once natural but became rejected because they were deemed unworthy, unsafe, or shameful. And for many women, their power, sensuality, rage, intuition, all of it was cast into that shadow. So instead, she projects. She sees women who embody what she has silenced, and she either envies them or judges them. And when a man is drawn to that wild, radiant energy in another woman, she doesn't know why. but deep down, it hurts. What she doesn't realize is that men are drawn to what feels alive. Not perfect, not pleasing, but emotionally alive. Because, in Jungian theory, the anima, the feminine energy in a man's unconscious, longs for emotional depth. He may not know how to say it, but he feels it when a woman stops performing and simply is. But that shift begins within. When a woman reclaims the parts of herself she once disowned, the sensuality, the chaos, the mystery, she begins to radiate something unexplainable. And yes, it's seductive, but not because it's crafted or calculated, because it's real. It takes courage to get there, to stop asking, what do men want, and start asking, what have I forgotten about myself? It takes healing the emotional trauma that told you love must be worked for, that your presence is not enough, that your softness must be earned and your needs are too heavy. It takes facing your projection, realizing that sometimes the qualities you admire or resent in other women are actually the pieces of yourself that want to come home. And slowly you stop chasing love like a reward. You stop believing that seduction is a tactic. You stop trying to be less intense, less intuitive, less expressive. Because the most dangerously seductive women are not the loudest, the boldest, or the most beautiful by the world's standards. They are the ones who have made peace with their own depth. They are the women who no longer beg to be seen because they see themselves. This kind of woman doesn't need validation. She doesn't perform. She doesn't panic when someone pulls away. Because she knows who she is, she's already chosen herself. And when she walks into a room, she doesn't try to capture attention. She simply brings her presence and it does the work for her. So if you've felt like you've lost touch with your power, you haven't. It's still there, waiting, not in a book or in a man's approval, but in the parts of you that you've silenced. Begin by listening to her. The seductive power you seek is not something you need to build. It's something you remember. There's something powerful that begins to shift when a woman stops trying to decode every text, every silence, every contradiction in a man's behavior, and instead begins to understand the emotional architecture behind it. If you've ever found yourself asking, why does he pull away right when things get close? Why does he feel so drawn to me and then vanish? Then you're not lost. You're standing at the edge of a deeper truth, and this video will take you there. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how to see through the hot and cold behaviors, the confusing signals, and the emotional walls men often build, not by chasing answers, but by unlocking the emotional code that governs his actions. And your own. Carl Jung taught that within every man lives the anima, his inner feminine. It is the emotional part of him that longs to feel, connect, surrender, but is also the part he may unconsciously repress. And when a woman touches that hidden place, he may feel both captivated and terrified. His ego, trained to protect him from vulnerability, kicks in. He may detach, retreat, or act cold, not because he doesn't feel something, but because he does, and doesn't know how to hold it. Meanwhile, the woman, you, may internalize this shift, thinking, I wasn't enough, or I said too much, or I showed too much of myself. But what's really happening is a mirror of emotional patterns. Your own wounded shadow might be triggered by his withdrawal, and suddenly, you're not just responding to him, you're reliving all the moments you felt unchosen, unheard, or emotionally abandoned in your life. This is where the shift begins. Because this video isn't about fixing a man. It's about awakening your emotional intelligence. It's about seeing clearly how his detachment is often a defense, not a decision. How your reactions are not your flaws, but your echoes. And most importantly, how reclaiming your emotional sovereignty, your calm, feminine center, changes everything. You're not here to chase answers, you're here to embody truth. And once you do, he either rises to meet you or he fades. and both are a blessing. Stay with me. You're about to remember the kind of woman a man can't run from, even when he tries. Before we begin, I want to prepare you for something rare, something most women never hear but deeply crave. These next 4 strategies are not surface-level tricks. They are feminine codes rooted in emotional mastery, and once you understand and embody them, they create a magnetic shift that no man can ignore. These aren't about controlling him, they're about reclaiming the version of you he's always felt pulled toward, even if he didn't understand why. These behaviors are dangerously seductive, not because they manipulate, but because they awaken a man's buried anima, the hidden feminine in him that longs to feel but fears what that means. When you embody these 4, his ego may resist, but his soul will remember you. The first strategy is, mirror his energy, don't chase. When a man pulls back, the instinct to lean in is overwhelming. You want to fix the space, explain yourself, get closer so you feel safe again. But here's the truth. Masculine energy respects reflection, not pursuit. When you mirror his energy, if he goes silent, you stay still. If he moves slow, you move slower. You create a sacred tension. In Jungian psychology, the ego resists what threatens its control. When you stop chasing, you stop feeding his ego and instead call out his anima, the part that begins to question, why do I feel her absence so deeply? That absence isn't punishment, it's a mirror, and mirrors make a man see himself. The second strategy is, speak through silence, not explanation. There's a unique power in a woman who resists the urge to over-explain. When you respond with calm silence instead of emotional proof or persuasive words, you create mystery, not confusion. Silence, when rooted in self-worth, doesn't punish. It anchors. It says, I am not here to beg to be understood. I am here to be felt. Jung described the shadow as the parts of ourselves we exile. A man may exile his emotional self, but your silence draws it forward. Like a mirror in the dark, he's forced to feel his discomfort, his distance, his choices, and that is where awareness begins. The third strategy is withdraw to create emotional clarity. Most women try to hold tighter when a man pulls away, but the feminine power lies in graceful withdrawal, not coldness, not punishment, but a soft removal of your energy from a space where it's not being received. When you do this, you send a psychic message. I trust myself enough to step back. Jung taught that individuation, the process of becoming whole, often begins with separation. When you give him space, you give you clarity. You realize that love isn't about proving your worth, it's about preserving it. And if he comes back, it's not because you convinced him, it's because he realized what your presence actually meant. The fourth strategy is, live in your feminine, not in reaction. Feminine energy is not weakness, it's not submission, it's stillness, depth, chaos, softness, creation. When you react, when you chase, defend, or beg, you live in your wounded masculine. But when you return to your natural feminine, something ancient reawakens. You stop trying to control the outcome and you begin to influence it with your essence. A man tuned into only his ego will feel shaken by this, because his anima recognizes you, and that recognition is both terrifying and unforgettable. Jung believed we project our inner divisions onto others. When you are whole in your feminine, you stop being a projection screen, you become a reflection. And a mirror always invites transformation. These four strategies aren't just tactics, they are emotional postures, energetic signatures, and when you embody them, you shift the emotional dynamic not through force, but through presence. A woman who knows how to hold herself with this kind of sacred restraint becomes unforgettable, not because she tries to be, but because in a world of noise, she becomes the silence a man can't unhear. There's a reason you've always felt like your softness was your weakness. Why you've tried to dim your emotions, to seem more logical, more easygoing, more low-maintenance. Why you've bent yourself backwards trying to be lovable, only to be left wondering what you did wrong. But let me tell you something most women never get to hear. The very behaviors you've been taught to suppress, the ones the world calls too much, too deep, too emotional, too intuitive, are the very same traits that make you dangerously seductive to the masculine. Not because they manipulate, not because they perform, but because they awaken. A woman who owns her sensuality without apology, who can be still in her silence, who doesn't chase but chooses, that woman activates something ancient in a man, not his mind, his soul. You see, there is a part of every man, hidden beneath his ego, his logic, his detachment, that longs for the feminine. Jung called this his Anima, the repressed, sacred feminine that lives within his unconscious. And when a woman walks in her deep emotional truth, not to get a man, but to stay in harmony with herself, she summons that Anima forward. He may not understand why he's drawn to her. He may even run, but her presence leaves an imprint. You don't need to be louder to be seen. You don't need to beg to be loved. You don't need to become someone smaller to be chosen. Because here's the soul-shifting truth. The most dangerously seductive thing about you is your wholeness. Not the mask you wear to be approved of, not the version of you that waits for a text, but the girl who performs femininity to earn validation. It's the woman who has reclaimed her emotional body, the woman who doesn't shrink when misunderstood, the woman who lives from her intuition instead of her insecurity. That woman, you don't just attract a man, you awaken him. You remind him of his own lost softness. You invite him to feel, not just function, to surrender, not just chase. But most of all, you remind yourself that love isn't something you win, it's something you recognize. And it begins inside you. When you break free of unconscious patterns, eyes of people-pleasing, over-explaining, waiting to be picked, you begin the process Jung called individuation. Becoming whole, returning to your true self, no longer living from a wound, but from wisdom. Let go of the belief that you must earn his affection, because when you stand in your full feminine energy, you don't chase love, you become it. And that energy is unforgettable. So tonight, don't spiral wondering what he's thinking. Don't overanalyze the silence. Don't lose yourself trying to decode his moods. Instead, sit with your heart. Let her speak. Let her feel. Let her come home. Because the behaviors that are most seductive aren't tactics. They're reflections of a woman in emotional alignment. A woman in her peace. A woman who no longer performs. A woman who remembers who she is and no longer forgets for anyone else. If this message touched you, subscribe. If something in your heart stirred, tell me in the comments what part spoke to you most. And if you know a woman who's forgotten how powerful she is, share this with her. You never know, it might be the exact truth she's been waiting to remember.